We're on.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission of the February 28, 2011, and 2 p.m. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
Commissioner Tofancan? Here. Commissioner Vidor?
Here.
And Chairperson Mardian.
Here. Before I go into the other agenda items, I want to announce our new commissioner, Caroline Tofancan, has joined us. Welcome. And if you'd like to tell a few things about yourself, or if you want to.
Yeah, Mike? Hello?
Just press.
Okay.
Yeah, start over.
All right. Well, thank you. And it is truly a pleasure and an honor to serve on the Historic Preservation Commission. I've been a resident of Glendale for over 30 years, and I truly appreciate the distinct characteristics of Glendale, the fine homes and beautiful neighborhoods, and I'd like to see it preserved for years to come. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome again. We'll move on. Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda of this meeting was posted on or before Tuesday, February 22nd, 2011, on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Approval of minutes of January 31st, 2011. Anybody has a comment or correction?
Just one comment. Under item number 9A, I would appreciate it if, for the record, where it says commissioners gave individual presentations related to preservation in Glendale, if that could be expanded to say the titles or topics of each commissioner's presentation, for the record.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay.
We took
Thank
these
you.
as super action minutes.
Super action, but, you know, as part of our first unprecedented special meeting, it would be good, I think,
Sure.
to recap what we did at the meeting.
Anyone else? Okay. We need a motion to approve the minutes of January 31st, 2011.
I second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor?
Yes, as amended.
Commissioner Tofancan?
Yes.
And Chairperson
I'm sorry, she can't vote. She wasn't here. She has to abstain.
Yeah,
Sorry.
abstain.
Okay. Oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. I don't have any cards. There's no. We'll deem oral communication closed. Item 5, comments from commissioners. Anybody has a comment?
I do.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment about our special meeting on last month. That I think it went really well, and it was great to see the turnout from the community. One thing I think we may want to consider for kind of lessons learned for next time is we may want to have no real agenda items and just do the special presentations. As you know, the meeting went almost 4 hours, I think. And we kind of lost some of our audience when they were probably there to hear presentations that they had to go before we even got to those items. So just a thought for next time.
Yeah. A widely shared thought.
Right.
Definitely.
And that's what I was, that's basically what I was going to say as well, but I also, since I think I was originally the one who suggested that we do more public outreach, I just wanted to say, you know, thank you to everybody, Alan and Jay and the whole staff and all my fellow commissioners for so enthusiastically embracing it and doing such a nice job. And I agree with Commissioner Shire's comments and hope that next time we do it, which I'm sure there will be a next time, that we give ourselves enough time to plan the meeting so that it can be as concise and focused as possible. And if we need to do some editing as we develop the agenda, that we have the time to do that. So anyway, thank you very much, and look forward to the next one.
I do share the same comments because I had an email from Patty Silvershire.
Yes, we got the same
And she
one.
had some, comments about our meeting. Yeah, we're in a learning process. This was our first one, so forgive us. We'll
We beg the public's forgiveness. No, I
lot of
just on the idea of next time, I'd like to make a suggestion to the commission. I think we should agendize this for next month's hearing. But I see we kind of looked at this as kind of a year-end wrap-up, the year-end review. One other thought I had subsequently was that May every month is officially Preservation Month. We get a proclamation from City Council. It's kind of a nationwide celebration of historic preservation. It might be a nice opportunity to do this in May, even though it doesn't line up exactly with the calendar, so that we can have one special activity the Commission does routinely every year during Preservation Month. So that would be an idea for you guys to think about. And then if you ask me to agendize it, then we could open it up. It'll be publicly noticed, and anyone from the public who's interested could actually comment, or we could just talk about it officially. So,
Good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
okay.
I had one comment, Mr. J. I don't know if I could say it as a question. What's our gate policy on designated properties? Do they require a permit?
Gate.
Gate in the front property or at the setback line? They require permits?
Not necessarily, depending on the height. If it's in the setback,
No, it's not in the setback.
if it's outside of the setback, and I believe it's under 6 feet high, like with the fence policy, I believe it doesn't require a permit. For our designated properties, though, we ask that all changes to the property come to at least staff level review, if not commission review.
Can I?
But there's not a mechanism in the permitting process that would,
Because I saw one of the designated properties just put up a gate.
okay. If you want to offline, give me the address, and we'll look into that.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. Anybody else for any comments or?
Nope, that's good.
Okay, we'll move on to old business. Considerations of Commissioner-generated proposal for future discussion regarding HPC policies and goals. I do see a chart here. Are we discussing any of these items
Yeah, well,
today?
this is the chart that we started last year, where if a commissioner has an item that he or she would like to discuss with the commission, we were running into problems where we were starting discussions without putting them on the agenda. So we've adopted the policy similar to council, where if someone sponsors an idea and a fellow commissioner seconds that idea, then we'll subsequently agendize it, but not necessarily at the next meeting. What we're hoping to do is establish priorities for discussion so that we're not kind of inundating the commission with 10 items each hearing, but that we can look at things on a kind of a regular basis and not lose track of some of the ideas. So this is the last set of topics that I had from last October. December and January hearings were kind of special meetings, so we didn't continue this. So this is kind of to reopen to see if anyone would like to second any of the existing proposed topics that we could then put on a future agenda, or to bring up any new topics today.
Didn't we second some of these?
Yes. No, we did.
We did second some
No,
of them.
then this is not the up-to-date list because I lost track of it in October. So I could go back to, do you remember which were seconded?
I think...
I don't remember any of
Okay.
them.
I believe I might have the version of this in my office. I'll be back in
Okay, great.
2 minutes if I can find it. Go through
So
it.
before we continue with that, if there are any new topics to discuss, this would be a good time.
Anybody has any
I
new
do.
topics? Go ahead,
I do.
Commissioner Vidor.
Okay. To add to the four I've already suggested, the discussion that took place in relationship to the house on Grandview that was recently designated really got the issue of policies and practices for naming historic properties kind of stuck in my mind, and I would like to suggest that we add that as a topic to create some kind of a simple algorithm for how names are selected, not to be restrictive or mandatory, but just to give us a basic tree of priorities for naming properties.
What we could do, the commission discussed this about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes, we did.
Really?
yeah.
And we have kind of a policy that was established at that time, which is pretty close to my my professional view of what we should use. So what we could do is, if you have a second for that, we could revisit the existing policy, make sure we're comfortable with it, see if we want to amend it in any way, and then move forward from there. So
I think it's a good idea to discuss it again because most of the commissioners are, new, and we also have a new member that joined us.
that's a second?
That's a second.
Okay, then we'll put it on the agenda.
I have a question in regards to that, though. Is City Council aware of our policies, and can they overrule us at any time? Because I believe we had the discussion regarding the property you're speaking
Yeah.
about here, and then City Council made a different decision.
Yeah, as far as I know, City Council isn't aware of the policy. My guess is they would still feel comfortable overruling it if they were in certain situations. That was kind of a just or judicious thought there. So, we could certainly make council aware of the policy if the issue comes up again. Put that into a staff presentation for council, so it's kind of right when they're considering the item.
Okay, anything else, Commissioner Vidor? That's good. Anything you'd like to discuss?
Not at this point.
Chair Martin.
Good.
Sorry.
Yes.
I was going to say, Chair Marty, and when you're ready, I do have a list that many of these items were seconded in our October meeting.
Okay, can we finish if we need to agendize any other topics, then I'll move on to that one. I just didn't hear, Commissioner Morgan, anything you needed to? Commissioner Shah?
Anything new or
Anything you need to add?
Nope.
Okay. Go ahead,
Okay, so
Mr.
yes, my notes from our October meeting have almost everything got a second. So your recollection is correct. Solar panel installations, first one, seconded by Commissioner Vidor. Citywide survey, seconded by Commissioner Shire. Mr. Morgan seconded consideration of interior features, as well as the effect of the craftsman survey. And Chairman Mardian, you added 2 additional items to the list in October.
Yes, I don't think they were here. One is the ex parte discussion.
Exactly.
And I don't recall the other
And a
one.
discussion about evening meetings.
Evening meetings, correct, yes.
And those
Yes.
were both seconded by
Okay.
Commissioner Shire.
Now, next meeting, I presume we'll discuss one of these? Is
Well,
that-
we can discuss more than one. I think we just need to be
Okay.
realistic. So this would be a great chance for you as a commission to kind of discuss priorities, what you'd really like to see sooner than later. Some of these I think we might be able to, discuss and kind of just make policies clear, and some are obviously something that's going to open up possibly a bigger issue, so.
Now, can we can agendize a few of them that are easier, maybe? The evening meeting, the ex parte, and I don't know what else.
Naming is already.
Naming is not a major issue.
Okay. And by ex parte discussions, that's commissioners outside.
Yeah, all I was saying at that time, and I don't remember who seconded, but I wrote it down. Any discussion on the agenda items prior to our meeting? Or related to the subject?
Okay, so
Property.
we'll talk to the city attorney's office about that. We'll look at the calendar of other city board and commission meetings to see if there are openings and possibilities for night meetings,
Okay.
and then see if there's interest in that. And then naming of historic properties, we'll bring back the old staff report that we reviewed, and we'll discuss kind of current views and the commission's opinion on that, so.
Now, did we say anything, because we had a project last time on Mountain that had landscaping and all that, some of us were concerned. Is that a priority item?
Sounds like landscaping may not have received the second.
I don't have it listed as having received a second in October.
Okay. So we didn't have a second there, okay.
And then in terms of any of the other issues,
No.
owner consent, we can get a direction from the commission. That would be an ordinance change. And it's a huge step. It's a huge difference from current city policy. So we can have that discussion, but that would be a very long-term kind of resolution, as I would guess.
Since I suggested that, can I officially drop that at this point?
If no one else,
No one seconded it. so
no
I
one
assume-
seconded it. Okay, so we can drop that. The commissioners' prerogative to change their mind.
I would second the landscaping. I think it's relevant, especially with the recent property.
Yes.
Okay.
Agree. And actually, on a comment on that is, and this may not be relevant, there may be an answer for this already, but I don't want to get ahead of the game here, but a question came up in my mind with respect to the Central Avenue property that we're going to review today, and the issue of not only landscape blockage, but other structures blocking a historic structure and what the implications are, especially if a structure is designated a landmark based on criteria E, which would be that it's a standout feature on the skyline or in the neighborhood, and that what does that imply about blocking it with anything, building, landscape, or otherwise? So,
Well, in that particular case, I mean, we can talk about it when we discuss the matter, but I think
you want to focus on
Well,
landscaping?
Well, I could also, they are similar issues, they're big differences, but they're similar. It's easy enough to just add landscaping or new construction that blocks views, and we can broaden the discussion when we agendize it.
that's fine. The reason, to respond to your question, on the building on Central, I mean, it's pedestrian-oriented, there's
Yeah,
hardly...
let's wait till we have that item. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Bring that up, though.
Okay.
okay, and did we want to agendize the landscape, or just the first three? We'll have.
I'll second landscape.
Okay. And then with the commission's permission, right now, our March agenda looks relatively light, so we shouldn't have any problem. But if we get an influx of applications, I'll try to balance things out, so keep our meetings to 2 or 3 hours.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, new business, A, 2990 Edgewick Drive, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mardian and members of the Commission. My name is Christina Park, and today I'll be presenting the staff recommendation for the nomination of 2990 Edgewick Drive and the property owner's request to enter into a Mills Act contract with the city.
Okay.
2990 Edgewick Drive is a 2-story single-family residence located on a steep hillside lot in the Chevy Chase Canyon neighborhood. The house, built in 1963 as a speculative project by developer Robert Prock, was designed in the modern style by architect Richard Fleming. Here is a map of the neighborhood. The house is located near the golf course. Richard Fleming was a former partner at Buff & Hensman and lead designer and supervising architect on Case Study House number 28, shown in the images here. I believe the Commission is already familiar with another Prock-Fleming project, this property at 1339 Romulus Drive in the Adams Hill neighborhood that was presented to the Commission in July 2010. The front facade is clad with horizontal wood siding, a motif that is continued at portions of the side and rear facades, which also feature sections clad with smooth stucco. The entry door and side lights and 2 garage doors are the only openings at the front. The home's most notable architectural feature is the narrow clear-story monitor, shown here. As you can see, it runs the entire length of the roof, providing light to the open-plan upper floor as well as the garage. It then extends all the way to the balcony area, as you can see in these images. Both levels feature wraparound wood balconies that extend across the back and one side of the house, giving it that indoor-outdoor feel so associated with modern homes in Southern California. A fenestration consists of ribbon windows containing fixed and louvered sash, along with angled transom windows at the south gable, sliding glass doors, and the fixed sash in the clear-story monitor. Here are images of the wraparound balcony. The side-gabled roof is slightly pitched and made of tar and white gravel, with deep projecting eaves at all sides. A short brick retaining wall separates the narrow patio at the front of the house from the street. The house appears to retain the integrity of the original design. The property was in a severe state of disrepair when it was bought by the current owner in 2010. The wood deck and railings were replaced with new wood to match the original design, and the California Historical Building Code was invoked to allow the new railings to match the original height. Several structural posts and beams were also replaced, along with portions of the roof decking, all matching the original construction. A significant amount of wood has been replaced, but the new work appears to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. This work is still in progress, and the owner intends to continue it as a condition of the Mills Act. A new front door and side lights were also installed in 2010, as you can see here. They are in the same location as the originals, although the new door is wider. New gravel roof was also installed at this time, again in keeping with the original look. After visiting the property and reviewing the nomination materials, staff recommends that 2990 Edgewick be considered eligible for placement on the Glendale Register based on Criterion D. The father of the original owner, Geraldine Dutton, was Frank Armstrong, a real estate mogul known for his involvement with the Pantages Theater and the Hollywood Roosevelt and Knickerbocker hotels, among other properties throughout the region. The applicant suggested the property could be significant under Criterion C on account of this connection, but staff was unable to determine that he had a direct enough relationship to the house or Glendale's heritage to merit this. Because Chevy Chase Canyon contains a number of fine examples of mid-20th century modern design, and there's no citywide survey as of yet, staff had no way of concluding that 2990 meets the first part of Criterion D, stipulating that it be one of the best remaining architectural types in the neighborhood. It is, however, a very striking example of mid-century modern style, and in accordance with the second part of Criterion D, the house does display outstanding attention to design, detail, and craftsmanship. The distinctive clear-story monitor, which is very noticeable from the street, is a design feature not commonly found in Glendale. The wood siding, decks, and monitor emphasize the horizontality of the design, while the stucco panels at the side facades provide a secondary emphasis of the verticality associated with the hillside design. Therefore, staff's recommendation is that the property appears eligible for the Glendale Register on the basis of its meeting Criterion D. Staff also recommends that the owner be authorized to enter a Mills Act contract with the city. And if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the Commission? No. Thought I had one, but maybe I'll leave it for later. Okay. Does the applicant want to say anything? Good. Come on up. But please do fill out a card after you finish. Okay. All right.
They're back here. No, don't
That's
worry.
okay. To finish your presentation, then, you know.
Yeah, should be. Yeah. Say, hold on, it's not on.
I didn't think so.
Is there a button there?
There.
Okay.
It's on now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start over. Again, I'd like to thank the Commission for considering our home at 2990 Edgewick Drive to become designated as an historical landmark property in Glendale. We would be honored to be alongside so many of these incredible homes, of which most architects are our favorites, especially in the mid-century modern style. I actually didn't prepare a speech. I just felt like I should just speak from my heart. I'm not really used to, I'm an actor, and so I'm used to having a dialogue in front of me, but I felt like it was appropriate under the circumstances. So I'll take you back a little bit to understand why we feel like this property was fatalistic for us. We had decided that we were going to look for a new home, and we had decided that we were going to do so in January of 2010. But prior to that, I was obsessed, and I kept looking at listings, and I saw this home. It was listed in, I believe, October 2009. And I put it under my favorites, and I kept looking at it and hoping that maybe no one would buy it until January, but someone did, and it went into escrow. So I let go of it. And in January rolled around, and we started looking, and we put our home in Toluca Lake on the market. And for months we looked and looked. And we had some offers in, and they fell through. We were looking for a mid-century modern home. Lots of people, small community of them, and lots of people want them. So we sold our home very quickly, and therefore we were under the gun to find. We felt like we were under the gun to find a new home if we didn't want to move into temporary housing. So we did finally find a home. We put an offer on. We liked it. I can't say we were absolutely in love with it. The day we put the offer in, the next day, I saw this house go back on the market. And I told my husband, and I called our realtor, and I said, we are going this morning to see this house. And we walked in. We actually couldn't walk in because the lockbox was broken, so we kind of broke in through the garage. And we got in, and I looked in, and immediately we looked at each other and said, put in an offer right now. And retract our other offer right now before it goes into escrow, and we have to deal with escrow papers. So he did so. We watched one other couple walk in and walk out. The house was in complete disrepair. It had been severely neglected, but we saw a diamond in the rough. We saw the gem, and we knew we were ready to bring it back to its former glory. We were prepared. We had the people already lined up, and we knew exactly who we were going to go to. So we went into a 30-day escrow that wound up turning into a 60-day escrow because of the bank. We have incredible credit, no debt, and this bank, big bank, made it very difficult for us. The condition lists kept coming and coming, and I, with a smile on my face, every day sent in the answers. And then they'd come back and say, we still need this information. And I would say, I believe I sent this to you already. And they'd say, well, we're not quite sure. You'll have to send it again. And with the smile, I'd say, okay, here you go. And so it turned into a 60-day. The sellers were very nice to extend the escrow. They knew how difficult it was. And at the end of the day, it paid off because we acquired this incredible home. So then for the next 3 months, we went into high gear of trying to get into a livable kind of situation to move into. We did heating and air, plumbing, new copper plumbing, the roof, the decks, the hardwood floors, which there was no floor, only subfloor. We painted. We refinished all the carpentry, which was original to the home, designed by Richard Fleming and actually built by him himself. We were fortunate enough to actually meet him face to face. We had him over for a Sunday brunch, and he told us all about the history of the home and went through just with nostalgic on his face looking at this home and remembering the cabinets and so on. So we feel very fortunate to have this home. It is our home. I can't describe it any other way, but this is our home. I'm pregnant with our first child. Our child is going to grow up in this home, which is very nostalgic for us. There's a lot more work left to be done, and we're ready to do it and to maintain, again, the integrity on the exterior of the home now. Also, our plans are, as we feel like this home is truly special, is to get it into some architectural magazines, Dwell, Atomic Ranch, and so on, and to be showcased, and the neighborhood as well, because we love the Chevy Chase Estates and our enclave up there in the hills. I love walking our dog around. It's just stunning, and I walk by homes all the time that I didn't realize were there, and I can marvel a lot of them. So there you are. I just want to thank you again for considering our home to be designated. It really would be a true honor. So
Thank you very much, Ms. Watson. Ms. Watson, can I ask you one question since you're up here?
Sure.
I'm strictly concerned on the outside. Maybe you mentioned a few things. What exactly have you done on the outside since you've purchased the
Nothing.
property? Okay.
We, well, I shouldn't say that.
yeah.
The doors were, well, nothing that hasn't been permitted that you haven't seen in the permits. We had to replace the front door. It was warped and just in disrepair. We did widen it. It was an original 30-inch door. It was very small. We couldn't even fit furniture through it. But it maintains the same exact style, which are the two side lights. and the decks were repaired. The wood had to be replaced. It was literally falling apart. It was actually designated a safety hazard. So they couldn't be used, and therefore we had to replace all of the wood. And we decided to use a redwood, considering the elements with insect infestation and any kind of water.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned the roof.
Sorry?
Okay.
The roof.
Right.
Yes, there was no roof to speak of, actually, at all. The roofer had told us that it was the worst roof he'd seen in his career, and therefore we went with what we felt was typical of the time, which is a tar and gravel. We didn't know what was there before. We had no way of knowing.
Oh, no, I think it's on one of the permits.
Oh, it is?
It was a gravel roof.
Oh, good.
So you're in luck.
Yeah.
We consulted with someone who specializes in that era, and were advised that that was something that would have been there.
Last
Again,
question.
yes.
Anybody has looked at it structurally? Any engineer when you did this deck repair and all that?
Yes, we have that. A structural engineer did,
Okay.
and all of that is on the records. It should be with the
Okay.
planning department. Papers were submitted. I also have them if you need them. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions?
okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the public hearing. Before we start, I just want to, since we have a new commissioner, although this is a mid-century house, it features interior features on it, but our main concern is on the outside. And let's keep that in an open mind. Although we may have a discussion later, which I respect that discussion, but
Yes.
let's concentrate on the outside. And I would appreciate that. Thank you.
And then in terms of the roof, I did just misspeak, I'm sorry to say, because there were two, you may have noticed in your package, there were two permits for construction. It appears that there was a 1961 design that was permitted but never proceeded, as best we can tell. And then the 1962/63 kind of building campaign. And the 62 permit does say the roof was covered with shingles. Doesn't, I assume that means composition shingles, not wood shake, but I'm not sure based on this.
Okay. Any questions to staff, or you want to start deliberation?
I have a question for staff.
Go ahead.
Just one question. Where are we on the new requirements that we had determined?
Good, yes. I was going to introduce that. We are going to be going to council with the list of new requirements. We don't think we're going to be able to get on before the election, so we'll probably be going sometime after the election in April. With the Commission's permission, I thought it would be easier if we kept all of the items that apply for the Mills Act through the end of June on the agenda so that we can continue to process applications, and then any approval of the Mills Act by the Commission in terms of recommending it for council would be contingent on the owner following through on all the conditions that ultimately are approved by council before we sign the contract at the end of the year. So we'll still have the same kind of waiting period where we'll cut things off at June instead of keeping them going through the end of the year. And we'll make sure that we have the site plans, termite reports, foundation reports, all of that before we sign the contract. If the applicant isn't able to provide that by November, perhaps the end of October, then we'll just cycle them through for the next round of 2012 Mills Acts.
Thank you.
Jay, Jay, that's of course presuming that the council agrees to the commission's
course, yeah.
recommendations, because they may take one of those items out or add their own.
Any questions, Commissioner?
So I
So
do
rename the Mills Act.
question about this. So just to be
Martin,
clear,
Mr.
I understood what just transpired, but does that mean we will be specifically tagging certain improvements or upgrades to the exterior to the Mills Act?
Of course, yeah. The
contract?
commission will have our standard set of requirements, the site plan, the photo key, the photographs, the termite report, the building inspector's report. All of those things will be standard for every
Good.
contract. And then anything else that the commission decides to condition as part of a recommendation, we'll bring that to council.
But right now, Mr. J, we're just, with the way we're approaching on these projects, because we don't have something concrete yet, we're just conditioning them.
Well, in this application, you do have, the applicant has listed some of the work
Okay.
program that they anticipate in the next few years.
Okay.
But might some items come forward in, say, the inspection report or termite report that we may want to condition in Mills Act that we may not know at this time?
Yeah, and that, one of the items that you asked for was there'd be some sort of staff-level analysis of the inspector's report that translates it into how these affect historic character-defining features. So if we found something that was unexpected, I would bring that back to the commission at whatever the next hearing would be, and we'll talk about it, so.
Any questions, Mr. Morgan?
No, I'm good.
Any questions? I had one question. In your report, you said Fleming designed 8 homes. 3 were in Pasadena and 5 were in Glendale?
I don't know if we know that for sure. That's coming from the report for 1339 Romulus. And these are the only 2 that we, we know of 3 in Glendale. There's the Romulus house, the house next door to the Romulus house, which has been very altered, and then this house.
This one, okay.
I think there was one project that may not have been built out of the 8.
Wasn't there one in Chevy Chase Canyon also?
Well, that's where we are, so.
But
You
not,
said there's another one.
but not the Watson house.
Is there another? If you come up to the microphone. Beth, please come up to the microphone.
Take it easy.
There is there is one on Chevy Chase Drive. There's one on Chevy Chase Drive. He actually he showed us, I believe, which house it is. It's right across from Golf Club. It's a house that's on the south side.
Is that also a PROC
It is.
project? Is
It
it the
is.
one with the red carport?
Yeah.
The project, okay.
Yeah. He said it was quite boxy kind of home, and so
Yeah.
that's the one I'm assuming he's speaking of. But there was one that was actually built on Chevy Chase Drive.
So we have 1 designated.
One designated.
1 still so
Nominated.
3 total that we know of.
4, it sounds like 4 that we know of in Glendale.
Next door
One
that's
is-
so altered.
Yeah, the one altered is, that's that, okay. Any other questions?
Well, I do have a question on the exterior of the house. The interior is gorgeous. I mean, you can see the attention to detail, but as we are working through the process today, the exterior has, other than the balconies itself, are pretty rough.
Right.
So I'm just curious as to the nomination process for something that's not quite there yet.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morgan, for bringing that up. I was going to ask that question, but I thought I'll save it for later. In the past, correct me, Mr. J. or Planning Department, how did we look at designations when work was going on?
We haven't had it come up very often. We've had cases where we've worked with applicants before they come for designation. They think they're going to be designating their house or applying for designation. We work with them to make sure that work doesn't do anything that would impact a potential designation. When we went on our site visit to this house, I actually thought this house, more than almost any that I've seen so far in the process, is kind of an ideal candidate for the Mills Act, because if the commission agrees that the work that has been done so far is sympathetic to the historic character of the house, that gives us a sense that the applicant understands the house and will continue moving in that direction and would actually be in a position to benefit more than many of our nominations in Mills Act contracts in terms of directly applying that money to ongoing work, that the commission knows that from the point of designation it would be directing, and there'd be staff level review, if not commission review also, for all future work. So in other cities, I know in Los Angeles there have been properties that are designated wall work either in derelict condition, with the knowledge that once work starts, it's going to be monitored carefully, or in process, and other cities have been comfortable with that. Personally, I think staff would be comfortable with that, to make sure that if the commission did think this house was worthy of listing and a Mills Act contract, that we'd work to make sure that the work continued in the vein of what you've seen. If you weren't happy with the work that you've seen, then that would obviously be an issue for you, whether you were interested in designating it or conditioning remedial work. So,
I do have a question. I just thought of one. What was the proposed name for the house?
just the address. It's our default.
No name.
Our default name for homes is the address, unless we have a significant person associated with the property. And in this case, we don't have a significant association. And I believe that's the old commission policy as well. It's my professional policy to not name houses unless the person who it's named after was significant, because it kind of dilutes the significance of naming houses in the first place. If we just happen to choose the first owner of the house, but that person did nothing of significance in the city besides build a house for themselves, which is wonderful, and cities wouldn't exist without that, but
But that falls under the other criteria.
it could. Usually it would be a house that's designated under criterion C, or a house that has a nickname. If you remember the house on Kenneth, there's a colonial revival house that's kind of set a little below street level. That's called Cedar Knoll, and had been called Cedar Knoll for decades. That's the kind of house that could have a name that doesn't have an
about
association with a person.
Mr. Fleming himself, who may not be by the book, a significant architect in the same vein as Lloyd Wright or Lloyd Wright Jr., but nevertheless is developing a reputation in Glendale for designing houses of a very distinctive style for that period. And, you know, we named the first one after Proc, the developer.
No, we didn't.
We didn't.
We named it 1339 Romulus.
I thought it was called Proc House.
The applicant suggested that, but we voted, or the
Overruled.
commission voted not to do that. In general, I don't think any city anywhere names properties after architects, because architects hope to build more than one house of significance in their career, since we have at least 3 Proc houses, or I'm sorry, 3 Fleming houses in Glendale that we know of. How do you choose? And I think
Well, I think also the fact of the matter is we've been naming, I mean, the names occur because they contributed to the development of the city, or they significant, they had a lot of influence in city development over the years, and that's how we generally designated the names.
and with the Rice House that we designated last year, designed by Gerald Lomax, because Mr. Rice was so significant in the building as well as the design, and he was the contractor on the project as well as the initial owner, it seemed that that was the appropriate name to use. And the same with Richard Block's house, where we named that the Block House, because he was not only the original owner, but also owned it for decades and was influential in its ultimate design. A lot of people, if they own a house and perhaps were influential, then in its actual design, then I think that might merit being named after those people, but usually not just for the designer. So,
Well, that's a good discussion, Ms. Vidor. Can we save that?
We'll continue that, yeah, that's right.
Can we
Let's
save
continue that
Otherwise,
one.
we'll be here for a while.
Yeah, it's okay. Onward.
Commissioner Tefengen, you have any comments or questions?
Actually, I had a question about the brick wall outside. Was that original, or was that built sometime later on?
yeah,
you know?
it appears, and I think Beth could answer this best. It appears that at least part of it's original, and that the shape, the form of it works with the house, but the condition of it and one section of it looks like there were some alterations. And
Actually, it was Richard Fleming himself who pointed that out to us. The section of the wall that goes with the up against the driveway.
Could you go back to that long shot? There you go. There.
Okay. So the left. Okay.
Right there.
So the left half is original. He pointed out that you can see this sort of line.
The score line there? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the mouse.
Yeah.
He pointed out that he believes that was added, and he supported that by having us look over to a retaining wall from the home next to us, where you could see there was, I don't know what to call it, but it was some degradation from soil, and it went kind of like this. And he said, you see this over here? I think there was no wall on the right side, and it was all soil, and it came down as kind of a small sloping hill to the exterior of the home. And it seemed correct to us, and you can see there is a bit of a difference in the mortar between the two. I think they got as close as they could, but you can definitely see that there is a line between, and had it been done originally as one piece, there wouldn't have been. It would have been seamless. So Jay and I had discussed the wall a bit, and are in talks about what to do about it. And I mean, we want the exterior to be as beautiful as possible. So whatever we need to do, we're willing to do to make it acceptable.
Thank you.
Well, one interesting aspect of that wall that you may have noticed if you looked at it close is that the horizontal joints are raked pretty deeply, and the vertical joints between the bricks are flush with the face of the brick. And that's a trick that Frank Lloyd Wright and other architects use to emphasize horizontality, which you can see on a house like this. You want those lines to flow horizontally. So that was something that made me think that this is an original feature to have this kind of screen wall here and the design of it. But the condition of it isn't great, as you may have seen. So that would open it up if Beth and her husband decided at some point to repair the wall or replace the wall. That would probably be something that we'd bring back to the commission for discussion, and then know that there was some architectural thought that went into this. The presence of that wall isn't kind of a random feature, even to the point that it looked like if water was running down the street, it would be a nice little dam to keep it from running in the front door. So,
Thank you, Jay. Commissioner Tufangin, is that all? Or Commissioner Shire, do you have anything to add? Mr. Morgan? I have a couple of questions. Garage door, is that original? I didn't think so. But
doesn't appear to be.
it doesn't appear.
But we thought it was appropriate in the kind of just the lines of it. And since the entire house is going to be painted, if the Mills Act were approved, that's one of the work aspects of the work program, then the doors would be painted also.
How about front landscaping?
Is it original?
Landscaping. There's no landscaping or
Yeah,
whatsoever.
and I think the applicants plan to landscape as part of their future work. So.
You got a lot of work ahead of you. Hopefully you'll get there. But let's begin deliberating. Anybody who wants to start discussing the core of the matter? I'll start with you, Mr. Morgan. I always start on this side.
Well, I find the interior exhilarating. It's gorgeous. I know we're concerned with only the outside of the house, but if the attention to detail for the outside will be as good as the attention to detail on the inside, I have no concern whatsoever. I think sometimes the house chooses you, and I think the house has chosen them in a way that I think they really love it. I mean, you can just see it when you walk inside the house. It's too bad we really can't show the pictures of the house inside. And something from the 1963, you really have to see the whole flow of the house. The outside really, truly doesn't do it justice. When you go inside the house and you see the way it flows, it's gorgeous. So.
Okay. Any?
Just brief comment. Unfortunately, I was out of town. I didn't get a chance to actually tour. But from the photos, I find the clear story element something very unique and a special feature for the modern architecture, which I really liked about the house. I do like, too, that they've submitted an active work plan. Hard to see exactly in the photos, but from what we can see, it looks like there is a substantial amount of work still to be done to the exterior. And I think this is one of those opportunities that the Mills Act can really be put to good use, and it isn't just an applicant wanting a discount, on their property taxes, but they'll actually be able to put that money back into the home. So I was happy to see that it's got the landscaping, some of the painting, wood replacement, and making sure the structural integrity is there.
Okay, Commissioner Vidor?
I agree with Commissioners Morgan and Shire on their comments, and I'd like to thank you and your husband, Mitch, for bringing the house forward. Congratulations to you on a wonderful acquisition and for your dedicated stewardship, even after such a short period of time. Since I've been on the commission, there have been a few houses that have come forward where I literally felt the people bringing their houses forward were very mercenary and had very mixed feelings about it, and to have a couple of owners who are working on a house like this in such good faith and showing such good faith to do a faithful restoration is really a pleasure, and that's what the whole process is supposed to be about. So thank you. Regarding the application, I agree with the criteria D. I think the house bears a very lovely, remarkable resemblance to the Romulus house, which is nice. There's this kind of thematic thing here, which is kind of cool. And Fleming certainly isn't, we don't know whether it's the best or not, but he certainly has a distinctive style, and this would be one of only, I don't know what the other one looks like, but certainly it would be unique in the neighborhood in that respect. So that's kind of nice. I also agree that the clear story windows are such a beautiful feature, and he has such a unique take on that, the way he wraps them around, and the extreme horizontal nature of the house. And most importantly for me was just the way he nestles his houses into the landscape, which in Chevy Chase Canyon is so critical because it's such a rustic, natural setting, and the fact that it kind of disappears and you don't really, go wow until you get inside is, I think, part of the beauty of the house. So I'm there.
Okay. That's one so far. Okay. Sorry. Commissioner Flanagan?
Well, I would have to say, mid-century architecture, I think, brought a new idea in floor plans and that very strong horizontal, plain, flat roofs and floor-to-ceiling windows, and I think all those are very evident in your home. And having walked through your home, it's just so beautiful when you walk in. It's so the clear story really brings in a lot of natural lighting. You're nestled between all those beautiful trees, and really to see you take such good care of the house and bring it back to what it used to be originally, and such great care to the cabinets in the kitchen, the cabinets in the bathroom, and bringing those back to its original grandeur or original beauty was very nice to see, instead of maybe changing them or anything like that. So I'm definitely there for you. So I think that was very nicely done.
Okay. Well, I do agree with most of the comments that my colleagues made, and I thank you for bringing this application forward. And the striking feature on this house is the clear story. That's the main thing on the house. And I do agree with Jay. This has a little Lloyd influence with the overhangs and the horizontal elements on it makes the house. The only sad thing I see, it's dilapidated. If we can bring this alive again, and by the Mills Act, I think this is a great example. We don't have too many examples in this. That's why my early questions, although Fleming has maybe 4 left in here, now we have 2. Is that third one or fourth one better than these? We don't know.
We know one isn't.
One isn't.
One that was altered is not. So.
For that reason, I'll support this application. And we need to make sure when we make the motion, the conditions and the work program is really cleanly spelled out. Because, yes, they've done the work in the inside. Now, although it's not on our prerogative to look at it, but I think the house needs a lot of work from outside. It needs to be refreshed. And to bring that back, and we need to make sure it's clear what's priority on it. And I'll let the motion maker do that.
Well, what I could do is read to the commission the work plan that the applicant has proposed, which I don't believe is in order necessarily, and then you can open up the hearing so the applicant could share her thoughts. We have continue the replacement of wood structural elements, and if you toured the house, you saw that some of the large structural beams have been replaced, and some of the posts have been replaced, but others hadn't. I looked at one, Christina and I looked at one that was so wood rotted and possibly termite damaged that you could, poke your finger through it. So that work will continue. Repaint the exterior of the home. This leaves open the question, some of the redwood on the deck, the applicants were not planning to paint, but that's an open question, whether that's acceptable to the commission or not. The brick wall at the front, for now, is calling for repair of the brick wall, and any future changes to that would have to, come back for review. There's one section that if you didn't have a chance to tour, you wouldn't have seen this, but there's a reinforced concrete wall that's kind of a retaining wall that one of the patios kind of butts up against. So it's kind of a rough textured concrete wall. It's not a fairly small area.
The side yard.
Yes.
When you're on the deck, actually. So it's facing toward, when you're facing the street on one of the returns, the kind of short ends of the deck, you see this. The applicants would like to add wood cladding to that horizontal wood cladding that matches the wood cladding at the rest of the house, which we thought would be appropriate since we don't know that that concrete was originally exposed. And then also the addition of landscaping. What we don't have from the applicants, so you may want to ask, is, what time frame they expect to complete the work in. And then you can add that as part of the condition, so.
Yeah, because we don't want to let this thing drag on for a long time.
No, I think.
Especially if there's termite concerns.
Yeah, and I think it's their intention to keep continuing the work that's already begun. So when you open the hearing again for the applicant to speak.
If you'd like to speak, you can come up again, please.
had a
Then we'll take a vote.
Jumping at the bit. Well, I will say the reason we haven't done any work is because we felt as though if we had done so and you didn't agree with the work, then we'd have to go back and redo it. And we simply don't have the money to do that. We've put a lot of money into this house so far. So, that being said, the first agenda is to deal with the wood that's rotting and the painting of the home. Obviously, termite is a huge issue. That's what ruined a lot of the wood to begin with, and specifically the deck. We've invested quite a bit of money into those decks, and so therefore to not maintain them properly would go against everything. That would not ever sit right with us. So termite work was done on the home. We had it tented before we moved in, and we plan on maintaining, and whatever comes up in the Mills Act to do, we will do. Obviously, I don't see this running into a 10-year thing of getting all of this done. Our plan is to first do the exterior and then to move on to landscape. Obviously, it doesn't really make sense to do landscaping first. If you paint and scrape, it's going to ruin the landscaping. So I can tell you, I don't know exactly what we'll do with the landscape. Our idea is to stay in this kind of succulent range. We love the Daly Houses landscape, and we know her. We've met her. She knows of our home. And therefore, we do plan on retaining her to do some designing and run it by Jay and all of you to make sure that that's appropriate. And as for the brick, I know, I'll be perfectly honest, I can't say it's one of my favorite features of the home. I kind of wish there wasn't a wall there, period. I just think if you drive by and you actually get to see the full grandeur of the wood siding in the front, that would be incredible. I don't know if that's possible, if it's there for a purpose, to stop the rain from coming. I watched the rain when we got loads and loads of rain, and it didn't seem to affect the home, so I'm a little confused.
I think it's holding up there's a
Yes, a little
grade
bit.
elevation
Yeah.
change, so.
Yeah, there is a grade out. That is true. That being said, we're going to deal with it. It's an eyesore.
Thank you.
Now, so.
We were going to ask timing.
Timing?
Did you have suggested timing?
We plan on starting work in January of 2012 to do the exterior, to start dealing with the rotting wood and painting. And as you know, even up when you were inside of the home, you could see when you look through the skylights, there was lots of paint that's crumbling. That all of the detail. It's going to be a lot of work, and we're up for the challenge. So all of that's going to be done first, and then to move on from there, I suspect we have to deal with the wall situation before we do. I think landscaping has to come last. I imagine. It really depends on the cost of everything. A 5-year period? Does that sound? I don't. A 4-year period? I don't know. I just, I can't say for sure. I could cap it at.
How long did it take to do the work that you've done
In the
already?
inside? It took-
No, the decks and the new structural wood.
That took 2 months to do.
Yeah, so
I mean-
so with that's a good basis. It looks like the amount of structural work you have left is probably less than that.
I
or
hope
similar?
so. I really don't. It really all depends on the cost. I mean, we're fully prepared to deal with the exterior of the home first, no matter what the cost is, and we realize it's going to be costly because we're only going to retain somebody who has an eye for detail, and therefore we realize it's going to be in the tens of thousands of dollars to do it, and we're prepared to do that. And then the wall, we need to discuss that. personally, I don't quite know what to do about that. We need to get a structural engineer out and see what's going on.
The commission could condition the work that we know is going to happen and give it, and just to remind you, for smaller projects like painting a garage door or putting in new garage doors, we've given people, it's kind of like we have a minimum 1 year, just do this within the year, calendar year. For something like this, you might want to extend that to perhaps 2 years if we think that that's, and we know the work's not going to start until 2012, so you can
2 years from now.
assume, whichever way you want on that. But something like the wall where there's some uncertainty, there's the choice of just making what's there look better, just repointing and cleaning possibly, or the idea of rebuilding or perhaps proposing something new. Since the Tappers don't know about that, or the Watsons don't know about that, we could just wait for that work to come to us and then decide if that's staff level approval or has to come back to the commission. I can say that if they were proposing something that wasn't replacing a brick wall with something that's similar to a brick wall, we'd definitely bring that back to the commission rather than, there wouldn't be staff level approval for that. And then finally, for the landscaping, we don't review landscaping.
Right.
So the landscaping should not be conditioned as part of the work. So that's okay.
Okay. Well, I just want to lastly say, whatever your feeling is on the time frame of when the work should be done, we're obviously open to that. I don't know what's usually put forth by the commission, but whatever you feel is appropriate is what I'll say.
Thank you. Well, I'll close the public hearing. The time limit, we haven't had a case that was similar to this, so this is first.
This is a larger scope than we've had.
Yeah. To me, the wall is part of the house, mid-century home. I have no objection. Maybe they can clean it up or do something with it, but I don't think it should disappear. That's my least of my concerns is the wall, is the house itself. Now, my question is, you said we don't control landscaping, but we want landscaping there.
Yeah.
We're not going to leave it like this.
Yeah, and the city requires that the landscaping be on the WaterWise website,
Okay.
to be drought tolerant.
All right.
But could we not have landscaping in the Mills contract as a condition? We just wouldn't.
Yeah, we could say we don't want to see a
Approval.
dirt patch in front of the house, and that the applicant should do some landscaping
Yeah.
within, and
Especially in front of the wall.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
the back,
Yes, you can't see it.
the front of the wall. Seems like there were some trees or something there. It was all butchered there, so. Yeah. Okay.
And that Mrs. Dutton planted cypress trees when she moved in, and they were taken down before we acquired the home. So.
Thank you. All right, with that, anybody wants to make a motion?
do you want to discuss the time frame before?
Oh, the time frame, yes,
motion?
yes.
I have a question. Maybe it's for the owner or for everybody. Is it reasonable to ask that since you're starting January 2012, that you deal with the structural aspect, the wood, and some of the paint criteria within a year, and that you can complete the entire work plan in 3 years? Is that doable, including the landscaping? I don't know if...
I believe so.
That would give you a year for the structural woodwork and paint, and then 2 more
on
years.
to complete the rest of it in 2 years, including the landscaping, which I know you mentioned, I don't know her name, the landscaper who
heard
did the
much.
Daly House, but, I think that landscaper is very sensitive to, aesthetically very outstanding and also very sensitive to the whole water-wise situation.
I think that's fair. I think 3 years is absolutely fair. And again,
And is this, I thought we had said 3 years.
3 years we discussed
was
it, but
kind
that's
of
not
our-
final yet.
But that's not final, but since we're going in that direction, that,
I was going to suggest the same thing, 3 years, but the landscaping, again, is not that much area there.
No.
We don't have too much to landscape,
true.
But with that, everyone concurs with
I
the 3 years?
agree with 3 years.
That's fair.
Okay, so the work would be completed by December 2014, and the structural work would be completed by December 2012. Termites, paint, and painting as well.
Okay. Well, take a motion. Anybody wants to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the property at 2990 Edgewick Drive with the conditions in the Mills Act for the replacement of wood structural elements and the repainting of the home to be completed by December 2012, and the repair of the brick wall, the lower retaining wall, and landscaping to the front by 2014. And I recommend that the Mills Act be approved as well.
But that's two motions we need to, okay, that's good, yeah, that's separate. Yeah. But that's okay, we can take both motions at the same time. I need a second?
Second. Am I seconding one or two?
Like to second both?
Okay. Second.
Sure, okay. Thank you very much for bringing the application forward, and roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes, thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Yes.
Commissioner Tefanken,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chairperson Mardia.
Yes. Congratulations. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We'll move on to
Fill out the blue card and let Ida have it.
item B, 7B. 403 South Central Avenue, Glendale Register Nomination and Mills Act.
Okay, I'll be presenting item 7B for 403 South Central Avenue. Let me just get the papers in order. This is an interesting application because it came in within the month after we had our year-end wrap-up meeting where we discussed the idea that we have a lot of single-family residences and not so many commercial buildings, not so many other types of buildings, and this is definitely kind of a unique, not completely unique, but definitely an interesting specimen of an architectural typology in Glendale. 403 South Central was built in 1923, and it was designed by Edward Flaherty, who was known for doing these kind of reinforced concrete storage buildings. It was something of a specialty that he had. And the story of this building is interesting because the city proposed to widen Central Avenue, and so the original building was 5 stories tall. And when the city came and said, we have to take the front 10 feet off of your relatively new building, it appears from an article that we found in the LA Times that there was some sort of court case that happened. And it also appears that through that court case, the owner was given the ability to build a 2-story addition to the west of the building, to the rear of the building. And then also, and I'm not sure this wasn't in the LA Times article, but suddenly the 5-story building turned into an 8-story building. So what we're looking at is really a 1929 building based on Flaherty's design, based on his structural system, but obviously dramatically changed since then. It's got a very interesting style in that it's just a completely utilitarian concrete building with some applied decoration. And this is pretty typical of a lot of these storage buildings that you see around the city, and I'll get to those in a minute. Here's the location. You can see it's in the Pacific Edison neighborhood, but it's in what we consider, downtown Glendale at the corner of Elk and Central. And here's some examples of the detail work where you have these decorative balconettes just kind of establishing the 3-bay system of the 2 side bays with the central bay. And then the 2 storefronts at the bottom, which were fairly common for these storage buildings to have rental space at the base, office space, and loading space kind of on the side facade. And what you have are these very dramatic kind of recessed entries. And it's hard to see because of the paint color, but if you saw the building up close, it's got a kind of a stepped profile that's almost an Art Deco profile. It's possible that reflects the 1929. Art Deco didn't exist in 1923. By 1929 it did. That's speculative, who knows? But you can also see in this photo, particularly under the balcony, you can see the boardwork that was from the forms that the concrete was poured into. So the building has this kind of interesting rough texture, like reinforced concrete buildings of the era. Here's the article from the LA Times talking about the addition. It was originally built for Robinson Brothers Storage. It was like transfer and fireproof storage company, which became Brock Storage and Van Company for a brief time. Mr. Brock continued to work for what was Lion Storage, and Lion was actually a big company. They were kind of comparable to Beacons at the time. And this building once had a big, I don't know how tall, 40-foot metal tower on the roof that had a vertical sign that read Lions in neon. So it was one of those great old signs that was taken down in the 1980s sign campaign. So I don't know if anyone was invited to go up on the roof, but the structural supports are still there for the sign. But my guess is it's not coming back anytime soon. When you look at the building, I'll go back to this photo. It has some similarity to the Masonic Temple in just kind of a very streamlined, kind of semi-Romanesque quality with these big arches, and then the incised arches that run up the front facade, and then the kind of very shallow stepped profile. From the side, this is the view toward Elk, so this shows the two-story addition at the rear. And you can see that, you know, despite its simplicity, this really is a visual landmark that's really stood out in the neighborhood since it was built. It does raise the question of what happens if something is built next to it. And my guess is that when you look at it from this side, if you notice the windows are only at the top 2 floors and they don't go down floors 2 through 6. I wonder if that was intended to either accommodate a building or if there was a taller building there when it was built, and you know that's long gone or now gone. So that's speculative and hard to say. It's similar to the Masonic Temple in that way, where we have a striking landmark building that stands sort of by itself and is a visual icon. Whether that was intentional, whether that was ultimately the plan, had the city developed differently, it's hard for us to say. But according to the criteria that we have, I think it's fair to say that this is a visual icon and has been for decades, probably since it was built. There's one kind of recommendation that we have in terms of the connection between the two-story building and the taller building, where there's a joint that has kind of opened up a little bit, and the applicants filled it with some of that spray-in foam kind of insulation material. When we looked at it with the applicants who aren't here, and I'm not sure, they were intending to be here, so I don't know if they thought we were going to city council chambers or if they weren't able to make it. But I think we can still proceed with the discussion, certainly. The intention that they agreed to was to come up with a detail for some sort of metal, kind of a plate that would fit over that joint and kind of provide a visual, kind of just hide the gap, basically, and not have that foam exposed. Here's an ad for Lion, and as I did a little background research into the storage buildings, it's interesting how they really were a part of kind of the social fabric of the city in the early days, where we had people who were seasonal residents who might come and go and want to put their household goods in storage while they were gone for fear of robbery. Here's a little ad for a couple that says they wanted to put things in storage while they just went on vacation. Now, I don't know if that means they were putting everything in storage when they went away or just their valuables. Most of these buildings did have secure storage on the first floor that was kind of like a bank vault type system. I don't think this building has it because the owners, when they gave us the tour, didn't say there was a special room, but a lot of these buildings would have special humidity-controlled rooms for pianos, or they had different uses. And what was also interesting is you can see the drive-through area goes to the freight elevator, and the freight elevator may have been able to be accessed by a van that would actually go up in the elevator. Some of the storage buildings had that. We can't say that this one did, but it's certainly a big enough elevator that it could have done that, although the cab that's in there now is a modern one. So that's a possibility. One of the problems that we had with the nomination is that, it's a very, very simple building, and the windows therefore take on heightened prominence in terms of the architectural composition, and at some point almost all of the windows were painted over. So it's staff's strong recommendation that if the commission is interested in designating the building and offering the Mills Act contract, that the contract be conditioned that all of the exterior windows have the paint removed and be brought back. And you can see in the photo on the top left that 2 of the windows at the upper floor don't have paint on them, and it really changes the solid-void relationship and the overall appearance of the building. That said, all of the windows that are in place appear to be original steel sash windows with wired glass, so it would be a matter of scraping and cleaning off the paint rather than replacing windows. And the owners said that they were open to that if that was the commission's direction. Here's another building that Edward Flaherty designed. This is at Santa Monica and Cahuenga in Hollywood. and I found an ad for the building, and you can see how these buildings kind of morphed over time. And if any of you had a chance to visit, I don't have a copy, but there was a drawing by Flaherty that they had, a blueprint that was framed inside the lobby. That was probably the initial design of 1923 that was more of a almost kind of Spanish sort of Churrigueresque kind of style. So that probably was never built, or if it was, that's the facade that was scraped off. You can see this building had a different kind of tower than was ultimately built, but you never know if it was built to look like this drawing and the decoration was taken off, or it just never was built that way. But the interesting thing is these buildings tend to be iconic figures in their neighborhood. They tend to be built outside of the highly dense city center. They're kind of just a little off on the side. So you have a few of these, the Emser Tile buildings and Old Beacons building in West Hollywood on Santa Monica. The kind of modern building at the top is a smaller example of a Beacons building from, I think it's in Sherman Oaks or Encino, but it's definitely kind of has this monumental character even at a smaller scale. And I think the granddaddy is the building that's just south of Santa Monica on Highland that's now a huge kind of billboard generally, but really establishes how these buildings are, you know, icons of the neighborhood, whether they're highly decorated, somewhat decorated, or pretty blank. They kind of have a deeper meaning, I think, because of the way they were used and then their location. So based on this, staff looked at the criteria, and we thought that this is one of the situations where we can say that in the Pacific Edison building, Edison neighborhood, there's no other building like this. So this is definitely one of the best remaining of its type in the neighborhood. And it's hard to say that the architectural design, details, or craftsmanship of this building are exemplary or outstanding, but I think when we really think about it just as a material building, as a reinforced concrete building, and how few of those we have, and what an important typology it was at the time, I think we can find that it meets the second part of the criterion. And then, as I mentioned, it seems to meet criterion E just because of its scale and its location. The question being, was that always intended? It is a corner building, so it's always going to retain that scale from several directions, even if there was a building to the south. But it's at the point as it stands, it's definitely an established and familiar feature of the neighborhood. So that's it. I'm sorry to say the applicants aren't here, so we'll have to accept the award on their behalf in case you do decide to vote for recommending this. But.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Go ahead, Ms. Riddle.
These sconces in the front, are those later, because they don't seem to have anything.
Yeah, they
not
don't look.
decoratively-
They don't look. It's hard to even say what style this building has and what's appropriate. But yeah, those don't look original.
Okay, let me see. And then the issue of it being on the corner, agree that certainly makes it easier for it to maintain its iconic landmark status in the neighborhood. But would there be any restrictions placed on how high next to it could be built, or would that not matter?
No, generally we don't have purview over construction adjacent. And if you think about the Masonic, where we looked at it and we saw that crazy window pattern on the sides, and there was kind of a presumption that that may have been expected, that buildings would grow alongside it. We could, in general preservation practice, if you think of a city like New York City, you have very tall buildings built next to very small landmarks sometimes. We could look at aspects, whether an addition or a construction next door would take away the status as a building on the Glendale Register. So that would be one way that we could say there would be an environmental impact through CEQA. So there would be some CEQA analysis that we could do to make sure that new construction was compatible, but I don't think we could ever say that you can't build next to, a designated building.
I was just thinking about height.
Yeah.
Next question is, I know that some signs turn up in amazing places, and since we are the new or pending new home of the Museum of Neon Art, I know that signs have been found, and that there are a number of collectors of neon signs, and neon is a very important conservation thing in LA. So has anybody checked to see if the original Lion signage is still floating around, or?
Yeah, I haven't heard. We haven't checked, and the owners didn't own it when the sign was taken down. It was huge. It's the kind of sign that was
15 to 16.
someone may have saved the letters. If
So you're saying it would like it's better that it's lost, and we wouldn't want to
Oh,
put it
God,
back?
I wish it were there.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Yeah, I don't think
you don't
we
think
could
it's-
restore it. And then we have, this is outside of the creative sign district that would go into the downtown specific plan area.
Oh, okay.
And it's also outside of the special sign district that's for the gallery and the Americana.
Okay.
So what that does mean is we don't expect that we would be renting out the sides of this building for billboard advertising anytime soon, but the commission should consider that, and we would return to the commission if the laws changed, because buildings like this tended to have billboard signs on them historically that were painted signs rather than kind of applied billboard-type signs. And even the Masonic Temple, I think we've seen a picture of a big Coca-Cola sign on the side of it and several other signs. But there's no proposal right now, and it doesn't meet the current code. So,
Thank you, Jay.
And one more question. The Wine Vault Palette building, is that by the same architect, or?
no, I couldn't find, on the permit, it's different, so.
Okay. And
Similar
that's
building,
not-
obviously.
That's not the Pacific Edison neighborhood either.
Right, yeah, so that,
That's a designated property, isn't it?
No.
No, it's not? I thought it was, okay. Yeah. Commissioner Tefangian, any questions? All right. Commissioner Short?
I had one quick question for you, Jay. You mentioned maybe a condition removing the vinyl signage or some of the signage that's on the building.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about that.
yeah, that's a chance for us within the current sign code to possibly remove inappropriate non-historic type signage, which is these tacked-on vinyl banners, and replace it with something like a painted sign. Whatever the dimension would be is dictated by code. And that's something that, if they did propose that, we could approve that at staff level as long as it met code. If you felt it was important enough to condition it as the Mills Act, to say remove the vinyl and paint signs, we could do that.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
I agree on the getting rid of the vinyl sign itself. 1923 is a very interesting year for the city of Glendale, and the simple fact that it was growing by leaps and bounds. And you have to think of it in 1923 when they built it, it was only 5 stories, but even then it was one of the most outstanding buildings in the city at the time, though Central itself was a lot smaller street than it was. It was much more residential than it became. Yeah, it's an outstanding piece. I mean, you don't see it, but if you go to the top floor and you look out over the city, it has an incredible view. I mean, just an incredible view. It's unique. It was one of those things that Glendale says that, I've arrived. I'm a real progressive city, and 1923 is a great year for progressiveness in the city of Glendale. And I think they did a really good job as far as they widen the street and they say you got to take off 10 feet of the front of your building. I mean, how unique. I mean, how often does that happen and the building stays? It's, and it'll be there probably long after we're gone. So, and if you get a tour of the whole building, and we were fortunate enough to see the building yesterday and go all the way up to the top floor and just look at the different layers, it's unique. I do hope that we can get the blueprint, which I do believe is what the building originally looked like. And there's a manor that I go to work in Hollywood, and there's a place at 4643 Los Feliz. It's called the Los Feliz Manor, and they have the kind of filigree work that's on the front that basically I think this building originally had. So if you wanted, it's about 6 stories, and it was built at the same time in it was built in actually 1929.
Is that the one with the green tile?
Yeah, the green tile.
Yeah, I think I know.
So, yeah, I think it does meet the criteria, if not for a lot of architectural reasons, but definitely for historic ones. So,
Okay.
One thought I have, since the applicants aren't here, but if the commission is thinking of conditioning work, and you want to do it not in the void of not knowing if the applicants agree or not, we can discuss it, make the conditions that you want. We could relay that to the applicants and have them come back at the next hearing before you make a final decision. Or you can make a final decision and the applicants can decide whether or not they're ready to meet the conditions. But since I'm not sure why they're not here tonight, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll be able to,
Thank you, Jay. I share that concern because I don't want to make conditions. I have a few comments that I want to talk about with you first. Because there's the south wall, block gray, that it was infilled. Go back to the picture, the south wall of the building. back, yeah, you see there on the bottom, right next to the auto repair?
Oh, the two windows at the first floor?
And were those, the front window frames and doors, these have been replaced, they're not original?
They're not original, no.
No, okay. Now, there is another thing that distracts me on the side street. You can't see, you may be able to see it there. There's an AC unit above the door.
The one behind the grill there?
Right there.
right
To the
there.
right?
Yeah.
Right here?
The left, yeah, exactly.
Is that it?
Hmm.
Well, AC units and transoms above doors that's very old style, but
Oh, no, that's a whole new unit right there.
I don't know what I'm seeing. So. Is it a separate condenser
Yeah, it's a separate
unit?
piece that was attached to it. I guess that's the only means of air conditioning for that building. But we need to, I mean, it's just you could see it. Maybe something needs to be done there. Now, what are these antennas on top? They have a lot of antennas.
There's cell site.
antennas?
It's a cell
Okay.
site for one of the cell companies, and there's also a satellite antenna up there.
How about those beams? If you go back from the back, there's beams, and yeah, right there.
Yeah, these. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that there in the staff report it covers. There was an apartment that was built
Right.
on top of this that presumably was the caretaker of the building's apartment, and these beams evidently were part of the structure that was taken down by permit in I think the 90s or in the package.
Well, I'm not sure of the history. I mean, I know the next door was parking before they put the auto repairs. This building has no parking whatsoever, right?
None, yeah.
None. I thought years ago I used to see that as parking. Now it's an auto repair shop. Maybe it was part of it.
Of course, the whole building could be a parking
Yeah.
lot. So.
Yeah, it could be. Now, if you go back to the front facade, there's the vertical, then there's arch on top. Do you believe that there was some other color? See, there's arches?
Yeah, color is hard to guess. It's kind of like this is one of the similar aspects with the Masonic,
Right.
which is now painted kind of monochrome. It has the arches, and you're relying on kind of shadow to kind of call them out. Even this picture I had to lighten; it didn't come out very well. So
To me, we need to bring this building back a little bit. I mean, we can't just leave it all white,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, I'm concerned with the windows. They're all wire glass, frosted windows, opaque.
Well, they're
could-
painted over.
They're painted over, right.
Yeah.
Now, how is that? I mean, they're going to scrape it off?
Yeah,
Yes, they were in the process. We were on one of
really?
the floors, and they were scraping some of the windows.
and they
Oh,
scraped.
they
They
did to the top,
scraped
too.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, those two were scraped previously.
you can
and
see
then
them.
these two windows do have a better shot of it.
Because they don't need to be painted. I mean, it's already opaque.
Yeah, these windows here were redone.
Redone.
These are in the office area. But none of the windows originally, as far as we can tell, would have been opaque. They would have all been open glass windows. This is the elevator shaft here. This is the freight elevator. And, yeah, so our strong recommendation is that we bring that back. Staff didn't have a recommendation about paint color just because in general the commission doesn't
Yeah, I
cover that. But if you
I mean, you can
Yeah.
see those arches, and that's a detail on the building. I know maybe they need to use scaffolding to do that work, but,
Well, I think to do the windows, they'll have to use some boom drop,
oh, yeah?
scaffold drops,
So
so.
if there's any way we can condition it, those two items, the rest is, and the AC unit, maybe a louver of some sort, so you can't see the unit, it's just a grill right now. Last question I have is the one tenant down below, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't trigger a sign program or anything like that?
No.
Well, those are my concerns. I don't know what the commission wants to condition, or we can continue this matter after our discussion and bring it back again if the applicants are not here. I mean, or maybe you can tell me if the applicants are willing to bring the windows back.
They said they were. We didn't discuss the air conditioning unit. We didn't discuss any painting. I think it would be fair, and there's no time pressure since we're not going to be doing the Mills Act contract till later in the year. If you wanted to hold off until they could be here, but I think if you decide exactly what you're looking for, we could relay that to them. They could think about it, and I guess the other option would be if they agree, you could vote today pending their agreement, and if they don't agree, then we could re-agendize it as a new hearing item to continue the discussion.
Is that like an appeal?
No, I don't, would
Because
that
once we
work,
approve
Alan?
it, they have 15 days to, or that doesn't work with our commission, that doesn't,
No, I think, well, they could simply reapply, I suppose.
Yeah, they could
Or they would
reapply.
withdraw the application, reapply, and say, we're not interested in the
so there's no
conditions.
fee involved.
I think there might be.
No, they've already paid their Mills Act fee, so.
All right, so how does the commission feel about these?
If I may, Chairman
Mr.
Mardian,
Rose.
as regards to the signs, and you were asking about a sign program, when we were discussing the option of removing the vinyl signs and replacing them with something more historically correct, if we will, short of us doing individual design review on every single sign, which typically we wouldn't do, and either with historic buildings or buildings in general, we're not looking at the aesthetic qualities of signs. We're simply saying, is the dimensions consistent with our sign code? The way to address that might be through a sign program. So even though the building might not require a sign program, it would probably be worth us having a conversation with the applicants to see whether they would entertain doing a sign program that would delineate certain kinds of materials or brushed metal or certain fonts or something for any future signs on the building, either the current tenants or later subsequent tenants.
Yes,
So that might be an option for us to address the sign issue.
The reason I'm questioning that space underneath could be 2 spaces. You know, they could turn that into 2 tenants. Then
Yeah,
you
there
have-
could potentially be more than one tenant in a building at the ground floor.
I think there's a rule in your sign program says certain number of tenants, then it
Right.
triggers a sign.
But if I recall correctly, the sign program is only required for buildings of a certain vintage. If you're very old buildings, typically don't
Then you
require
don't-
them.
okay.
Yeah. But they still have the option of providing a sign program to meet some
And
aesthetic
if you look at
concerns.
the signs that went up on pallet, those were staff-approved signs taking the character of the building into account. So that could be something similar for the ground floor tenant. When we talked to the owners about their business signs, it's called Central Storage now, they have a logo that they've developed. They would use that logo again. They would have a sign that basically looks like the vinyl banner sign, but I think the goal would be to have it be a painted sign directly on the concrete.
Okay.
Possibly it could be an applied sign with a different material, but I think the most historically appropriate would be the painted sign.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion or any other.
Discussed it.
I think we are discussing it because we closed the public hearing. There was, I mean, we can deliberate if you like, Commissioner Vidor. Go ahead. You can start.
Okay. I really have some concerns. I think this is a great building, and it certainly is worthy of being designated, but, you know, it was pretty straightforward on the last application, and you saw how much interaction we had with an owner who obviously is very on board with everything, and here we have a number of issues, and we have nobody to have a dialogue with. So I'm not feeling real comfortable with this because I have so many questions that should be addressed to the owner. And some of these questions are, we saw a couple examples of buildings where the windows are currently painted over in other areas of the city or the area, and, you know, are they painted over for a reason? Is there some kind of storage issue around that, or if they agreed that every window can be scraped?
We talked about it. There was one of the owners had some concern that some of the windows opened into storage lockers, but when we were up on the floors, and I don't know if you all got inside, it appears those are kind of units.
Yes.
Yes,
that would
they are.
have kind of metal on all 4 sides, so the walls may butt up against the window. One of the, and this would be difficult, in some cities, the important thing is to have the mullions and the glass read as different materials and different colors. Some cities do back painting, where you paint on the inside of the glass, so you still get the reflectivity and the sense of texture and shadow of the windows. That wouldn't work if there's a metal storage container butted up against it. So the risk would be that once you uncover the windows, you might see some metal behind it. But I think the enhancement would be much better than what we have
Okay.
today.
I concur.
The signage, I think somebody ideally should do some outreach, since we have pictures of the Lions signage, to see if it's anywhere. And there's a vast array of networks on the internet and elsewhere amongst museums and collectors where at least somebody could look for it. The sconces, I think, are not appropriate to the building, and I agree with all of your suggestions and condition criteria. But I'd like to kind of be able to touch and feel the owner's attitude and willingness to do some of the things that the commission would request.
If our conditions, if we feel strongly enough about our conditions, does it matter the owner's attitude or opinion? Or if we feel strongly, should we not just present it with the conditions, removing the paint, taking the vinyl signs off the building and present it as that's the way we would approve it and see where they are from there?
No.
I mean, because if they're not willing to take the paint off the windows, is it a deal breaker for you?
Would be yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, that's a deal breaker for me because
That's what
I
I'm
don't,
thinking.
that's
Our
the only,
conditions.
yeah.
Yes.
That's the only thing that's the defining feature on the building. We need to see those,
Right.
sconces or embellishments could be changed fairly quickly. Now, we can, or continue it if you like,
Yes.
but I want to hear Mr. Fanga's,
I would have to agree with the same things. I think the paint needs to be scraped off, and definitely the sconces would need to be changed as well, to be brought back to.
Okay.
I believe, like Commissioner Vidor, that they should be here, that we should have a chance to actually discuss this with them. I mean, they're asking for a lot from the city of Glendale, and I think we, as commissioners, should demand that they come and answer our questions in person.
Well, I agree with doing that. In fact, this is substantial square footage, substantial value on the building, so if they're asking for the Mills Act,
Correct.
there's quite a bit of incentive there.
I mean, I like the building immensely, but I would like to have everyone's questions answered by the owners of the building. I think that's appropriate for us as a commission.
And there was nobody there yesterday when I came through, so I wasn't.
Yeah, me and her had
We-
different.
There was just a worker there, and he
had
didn't
no
know who
idea.
we were, and he was very nice, and he offered to.
You were there between the hours?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So
We met somebody upstairs that
Okay.
gave us a tour of the place.
Okay.
Maybe there's some cold feet out there in Glendale.
All right. Commissioner Shire, any other things you want to add, or are you?
No, I just wrote down there's 6 items that we talked about conditions, just maybe for the record, if we're going to have them come back.
If you want to read those to me, I'll
I
write
had
them
the removing the paint on the windows, taking the vinyl signs off the building, the metal plate where the 2 buildings join, potentially accent paint on the exterior for the arch areas, the AC unit, and the sconces.
I agree with those. We can relay those, and we can continue
Should
that.
we then add the concern about these infilled windows on the south facade?
Yes, that's something.
That,
Anymore.
that
Okay.
could be a security issue. Would that be something if they were just painted out?
Paint it out so you don't have that little, because it's on the other side's property anyway, so I don't think they'll mind having it painted. Now, are we going to relay this information? Are we continuing this? Or am I feeling that's
Sounds
a
like
continuation?
I would
That's your
agree.
colleagues.
Let's take a vote to continue, or you want to take another vote to move it on with these conditions and let them respond to us? Would you like to make a motion to continue, or you want to?
Okay, I'll make an attempt at that, to make a motion to continue this to a future meeting with the conditions as just read, attached to the, approval of the application as well as the Mills Act, in order to review them in a commission setting with the owner present.
Alan, does that need to be a continuation to a date certain?
If we could continue just to a date certain, I don't know that we have to, but let's just say we'll do it at our next meeting.
Yeah, March 28th is our next meeting.
Okay.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Tefanken,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
And Chairperson Mardia.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. It was very good examples you showed us there. We only have 3 buildings like that in town. Yeah.
We've got 2. But no, but we have a third storage building in North Glendale, but it's not quite as monumental. So, but taller
you.
than most of its neighbors.
Now, how did this was shepherded? Did they just come in and ask for it? I mean, just conversation sake?
Yeah, the Tim Gregory, the building biographer, said he had, and this was a long time ago, he said he had someone interested and then never heard, so I thought it disappeared, and then all of a sudden it was on my desk just after we had the hearing. So
Okay,
I had
it's in the air.
go ahead.
One more item.
One more item.
Well, regarding the historic, or adding things to the historic register, I thought you were going to be preparing for us each time there was a nomination, a sheet to read off of and the reasons why, the eligibility and,
You mean
how to-
a motion?
yeah. And then, so we'd keep it in the file with, say it was brought forward with 3 potential criteria that it met. And we determined it was only one, we would check that box, we would,
Yes, the motion sheet.
I don't know what you
Yes.
call that sheet, but I think we.
Everything changed at the end of last year, and we were kind of going in different directions. I'll get
That
up
was
to
really,
speed.
that was really helpful, and I thought you
Yeah.
wanted it in the file. That would have helped us with some of our motions today.
Apologize, I will get it
Like an
together.
evaluation sheet that we're talking.
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so
Oh,
big star next to that one. Let's see.
we have come a long way in many years. We keep enforcing our ordinance. But that's very good.
3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yes.
Progress.
All right. Next item 8.
Okay, I just wanted to share an update about the Mesneger barn up in Duke-Majan Park. It's going through the seismic upgrade that the commission approved over 2 years ago. So this has been a long time coming. First, I wanted to share this photo. I don't know if any of you, I think Mike has probably seen this, but this just shows how fragile and how terrifying the station fire was for everyone up there. When you see this little oasis of parts of the south end of Duke-Majan Park, and then just the incredible burn area, but obviously the red roof over here is the barn. And so the barn came through. And here is the barn in its previous condition, and one of the issues with the seismic stabilization was that everyone agreed from the very beginning that this bond beam, this steel beam that ran around the entire building like a belt, including going right over the window openings, was not a good idea. So the commission approved, Architectural Resources Group and their engineers came forward with a new proposal for seismic upgrade, and that work is going on right now. So to date, the bond beam has been removed. All of the window openings are going to be refilled with new wood sash that was based on the dimensions of the original wood sash that was there. One of the good pieces of news, I think you can see it here, there's originally they didn't think they'd be able to reopen some of these lower windows because of shear wall issues. They did new calculations, and they found out that they can take out the concrete infill from the lower windows, at least in many of the locations. So there'll be new windows coming back at the lower level. And then when we come inside, you can see, if you remember, there was a proposal to put in a new bond beam, a new concrete bond beam at the interior that ran at this mezzanine level. Originally, the Mesneger family lived in the barn. So they would have animals and equipment and winemaking stuff and whatever else they had downstairs, and then they had their apartment kind of up on the mezzanine level. That floor and most of that material is long gone. But here you can see the formwork, the rebar for the concrete reinforcements coming in. And here you see these buttresses, these concrete buttresses in place that are tied into rebar down on the floor. We have a new concrete bond beam at the interior, so it's still a major intervention, but it's not like the old one running around the outside. And then even something like the chimney breast and mantelpiece is still up at the original floor level that shows, like, anyone going in the building is going to say, why is there a fireplace up there? And then once this has kind of an interpretive program going, they'll learn about the family, they'll learn how they lived there, they'll learn why they were important in Glendale history. So it's pretty exciting that this is really happening after all of the approvals that we gave it a few years ago. If you remember, there was also an issue with some bathrooms and an interpretive center. That's the next phase, and so that's not part of what we're looking at right now. But the approval stands for the bathrooms that the commission approved. What we haven't looked at, and I'm not sure how that will work since it's kind of freestanding interpretive, there's going to be some sort of museum component, but the main plan is to have this be available as public space either for rentals or for city public events. And so I'm not sure how much more we're going to be looking at the kind of interior work. But this is exactly the kind of stuff where it's interior work that affects the exterior appearance of the building, so it's definitely something that we need to be looking at. And so far, it looks good. And I think, yeah, that was it.
Before we close the meeting, I just remember something I should have said in the comments period. I had an email from Historical Society President John Lecasher pertaining the brick building that is under discussion or purchased by Americana.
Right.
Do we have anything to say about it?
Yeah, the building is not listed on any surveys. They'll have to do CEQA analysis before there's any demolition. And at this point, we haven't seen a proposal except for this kind of conceptual proposal that it is in the way of what they want to do.
But do we have any say-so on it?
The
Because that's in
commission,
redevelop-
the commission doesn't have any say-so, but we have, through the California Environmental Quality Act, there's, you know, it's been identified by the Historical Society as a building of interest. It hasn't been identified as a historic resource at this point.
Okay.
So part of the CEQA process would be looking at it that way.
Okay. Thank you. It was a very good presentation today. Nice to meet you, Christine. Welcome. With that, I take a motion to adjourn. If anybody else has any other comments? No? Okay. Thank you. We're adjourned.